Thank you very much, Jason. Thank you for all the people who made this possible today. Thank you very much to the Korean press for being here and communicating my views to the Korean community in Los Angeles, because at no time in recent memory has the safety and security of the Korean community been more threatened. And at no time is there an election that has been more important than this election coming up for the California Attorney General. Now, many people don't understand the power of the California Attorney General and why they should look at the person, not necessarily the party, to decide who should be their California Attorney General. The California Attorney General under the California Constitution is the chief law enforcement officer of the whole state. What does that mean? That you are basically like the super DA, the boss of all the county district attorneys like George Gascon. And what I have vowed, because George Gascon has refused to do his job to bring safety and security to the Korean community and to all of Los Angeles, that I can come into Los Angeles on the first day and bring the over 4,000 lawyers for the California Attorney General's office into Los Angeles. Because if he refuses to do his job, if he refuses to go after people stealing from small businesses, if he refuses to keep people arrested and not let them out when they get arrested in the morning so that they're out in the afternoon to harm our community, if he refuses, if someone brings a gun, that he's actually going to charge them with that gun offense to keep them in jail much longer, I, Nathan Hochman, as your California Attorney General, starting on January 3rd, can come into Los Angeles, remove George Gascon, and go ahead and put someone in who will do the job. So when I say safety and security are the issue for this election, it's not just Nathan Hochman saying it. I see that when Californians are asked the question, what do they think about their safety and security? For the first time in 20 years, they put safety and security at the top of the list. And why is that? Why is it at the top of the list? Because I don't have to tell people in the Korean community what's going on. That we have a spiral of lawlessness where one person can go into a small business, steal just under $950 and walk out because the DA won't do his job. That then leads to 3 people running out of another small business, 10 people running out of a Walgreens, 80 people running out of a Nordstrom's, 100 people we saw recently ransacking and stealing from a 7-Eleven here in Los Angeles, smash and grab robberies, follow home robberies, and a double-digit rise in violent crimes. The criminals know when the prosecutors are not doing their job, and right now they see the California Attorney General, our current one, appointed by Gavin Newsom. He is the buddies of George Gascon. Rob Bonta, our Attorney General, is buddies with George Gascon and will do nothing to stop George Gascon. I supported Gascon's recall, and I will come into Los Angeles to stop the reign of King George, which is what I call it. So I will bring back a spiral of lawfulness. And what does that mean? It's accountability. It means that all crimes will have proportionate consequences. And because I have experience, I understand what the difference is between people who need to be prosecuted and put behind bars and people who can serve their debt to society, like a first-time offender who has no violence in his record, by community service. So let me give you the one thing you need to understand if you understand experience and how experience can help you do the job. I have 30 years of experience in criminal justice. I was a federal prosecutor here in Los Angeles. I went after narcotics traffickers and gang members. I was appointed by President George W. Bush to be the U.S. Assistant Attorney General in Washington, D.C., and supervise all the tax prosecutions across this nation, and I've been a defense attorney. 30 years experience of criminal justice. How much for my opponent who got appointed, not elected, by the governor? 0. 0 years of law enforcement experience versus my 30, but he wants to be, and he is, your chief law enforcement officer, but he has 0 years of experience. That would be like you going in for heart surgery. And right before the heart surgeon is about to cut open your heart, you ask him, how many heart surgeries have you done before? And he says, well, 0. I've done 0 heart surgeries. In fact, I'm a dentist, but the president of the hospital wanted me to come in today and do your heart surgery. Rob Bonta, my opponent, is a dentist pretending to be a heart surgeon. I have a 30 years experience in this example of being a heart surgeon, of doing that surgery and making the patient, in this case, all the voters and all the people in California, safe and secure. And that's what I would do, because I believe in 3 key core principles. First, you must partner with the police, not just always treat them as your enemy if you want to solve violent and street crimes, homelessness at an all-time high, or even fentanyl poisonings that'll kill more Californians than COVID will this year. The second thing you have to do is that if you want a better hired, trained, and supervised police force, you actually need to pay for that rather than defunding or cutting a police's budget. And third, that you need to ensure that all crimes have proportionate consequences. And I don't mean going back to days 30 years ago where you put people in jail for 100 years. No. But right now we put people in jail for 0 years. And I believe in the middle ground where you need a prosecutor's knowledge to understand who are the true public safety threats and need to be behind bars, and who are the people who, again, can serve their debt to society in some other way. So this is an incredibly important race. I ask everyone who is watching or hearing what I'm saying to ask themselves this question. Do you feel more safe and secure today than you have in the past 2, 4, 6, or 8 years? I go up and down the state. I speak to Californians. I've spoken to different Korean communities throughout this entire state. And the answer has been no. I don't feel more safe and secure today than I have in the past. And I said, well, then what you have to do is you have to vote for the person for the next 4 years who will make you more safe and more secure. Vote for someone with 30 years experience versus 0. Vote for someone who is going to focus on the victims first, not the criminals, because my opponent has enacted the most pro-criminal agenda in California history. So the choices are really that stark. Do you want someone experienced who focuses on the victim first, or do you want someone with 0 experience who focuses first on the criminal? My name is Nathan Hochman. I'm running to be the California Attorney General. And if you look at my record, if you look at my experience and what I want to do, I think that you need and should vote for me in this coming election. The ballots are going to come out next week. The election goes all the way through November 8th. And I thank you very much for being here today and allowing me to share my views with such an important community, the Korean community.
Yeah,
I'm Mr. Hoffman. I'm from Radio News. In your press release, you mentioned about the April 29th LA riot. Could you share your experience and what you did during that time?
Certainly. So the LA riots had an aspect of both violent crime and hate crime mixed into the two. And I've been working, for instance, we'll start with hate crimes. Since for the last 30 years, I've been working on fighting against hate crimes in all different communities. Now, I come from the Jewish community here in Los Angeles. Anti-Semitism was one of the issues that my father dealt with and that I've had to deal with as well. And one of the things, the lessons that we learned in successfully getting hate crimes legislation passed and actually fighting them day to day, which I would bring as the California Attorney General, is this. You have to partner with other communities. The Jewish community here in Los Angeles is small, but we have worked with the Korean community, other Asian communities, the Latino community, the Black community, the Sikh community. And together we have found, as my father used to say, that the fist is much more stronger than the 5 fingers. That if each finger is acting independently, they don't have the power, but if they act together and they partner together, that they actually can get something done. And that's what I did with the LA riots. With the LA riots, there were people, it was both a hate crime and violent crime explosion in Los Angeles. So what I did is that what we found out is that when the federal government came in to provide aid, to provide billions of dollars to Los Angeles for the people who got harmed, sadly, many of those people who applied for the aid applied for it fraudulently. And we had to do something about that. And what we did to go after the fraudulent, the people who were applying fraudulently, is I brought together 15 different federal, state, and local agencies, and we brought 70 prosecutions in 6 months. But importantly, we told people that if you give back the money you shouldn't have taken in the first place, that we would go ahead and not go after you criminally. So we got $25 million through our prosecutions, but we got $25 million actually voluntarily returned through this amnesty program. That's something I would do that the current Attorney General has completely failed. And let me give you the biggest issue in California history, the biggest fraudulent issue that came and has left the public's idea, which is $30 billion EDD fraud. So we just had $120 billion come from the federal government to the state of California as part of the COVID relief. $30 billion got stolen of that $120 billion. That is bigger than the state budgets of 16 states in the United States. Imagine a state losing its entire budget, and that would be 16 of them losing their entire budget. But we have a $30 billion theft, and where are the prosecutions? Where is the California Attorney General? He is missing in action. Why? It goes back to that whole point I raised before. When you have 0 years of law enforcement experience, you don't know what to do. You don't know who to partner with. You don't know how to bring an investigation like I did with the LA riot investigations. So it's not a shock that I brought 70 prosecutions in 6 months, and he's brought almost 0 prosecutions in 2 years. So again, if I'm the California Attorney General, I'll go after the people who are committing crimes in our state. They will understand that there is a new, consistent, fair line that is being enforced. Because I'm going to tell you something, the people who really pay attention when George Gascon moves that line, or Rob Bonta moves that line in favor of the criminals, are the criminals. And if they think that they can go ahead and hurt members of the Korean community because now no one is prosecuting them, they will. They need to know that the line is back. It's fairly and consistently enforced. I will do that. I will do that through the district attorney's office, through the 4,000 lawyers in the California Attorney General's office. And the Korean community will know that they have a fighter out there to support their safety and security rather than someone who's just focused on the criminals.
Korean deal Brian Choi. Somewhere in your platform, you said about juvenile cases we're just putting too much slap on the wrist. Does it mean that if you take the office or you go prosecute more juvenile cases than before? What's the guideline that you are suggesting?
Certainly. So what I stand against is a blanket policy. In other words, where you say up front, I am never going to try a juvenile as an adult, no matter if they did the crime when they were 17 years old and 364 days, one day before their 18th birthday, or they engaged in mass murder. They killed, 2, 10, 20, 30 people, and you've said in advance, we will never prosecute that person as an adult. What I would do is what prosecutors do who have 30 years experience. You look at each case individually. So you look at the defendant and his background. You look at the crime committed and how severe a crime. You look at the impact on the victim, and then you make a decision. Now, before George Gascon, the DA's office under Jackie Lacey, under Steve Cooley, was doing its job fairly and consistently, and some juveniles got tried as adults who engaged in the worst types of crimes, and most did not. I would go back to bringing that discretion, that experience, to making the decision. Now, again, if you have 30 years experience, you're able to figure out which juveniles should be prosecuted as adults and which ones should not. If you have 0 years experience like Rob Bonta, you need a blanket policy because you can't make the individualized analysis for each case.
You talked about homelessness issue and you talked about compassionate solutions. Can you share what your ideas of compassionate solutions are and how the state government could actually apply to the local community that's actually happening in reality?
Certainly. So I start with the idea of some facts. The first fact is that approximately they estimate 70% of our homeless population suffers from severe mental illness, substance abuse disorder, basically a drug addiction, or both. And that it is not compassionate to leave people on the street in dangerous situations, in these encampments where they're dying. Violence is a daily, almost fact of life in these encampments, in addition to them being incredibly unhealthful as well. So to show compassion to the homeless, you need to deal with the mental illness aspect, you need to deal with the drug addiction aspect, and you need to basically move them into locations where they can get these services. So one of the programs that I would seek to scale up is something they actually do here in Los Angeles called the Homeless Outreach Services Team, HOST. And what they do with the HOST team is that they partner the police with the social service organizations like the Department of Mental Health, Department of Social Services, Homeless Services, Public Works. And they go out as a team to deal with the homeless encampments. And they do 5 things when they get there. They identify each and every homeless person and shake their hand. And they get to know them at a human level. They assess their needs. They need to figure out what's going on. Are they out there on the street because they have mental illness, a drug addiction, or maybe they just lost their job? So if they just lost their job, we need to help them get a new job. But if they're out there for these other reasons, we need to get them the services they need. The third thing they do is outreach. And by that, they basically find a place in the city that has the services each one of these people need. What they have found is that they only need to get to the third step to then suggest where these people need to move to actually get them to move. They have moved thousands of people in Los Angeles County and only had to arrest 2 because they treat them humanely and they put them in a better situation than just being out in the streets in a tent. But the 4th and the 5th part of their program is, look, they'll post a sign that says you have to move, and 14 days later, if they haven't moved, they will. And that's the idea that the public streets, the public sidewalks are for the public. And if you want to go ahead and put your tent or your sleeping bag somewhere and there's a room for you to go to, you don't have the right to put it and block a sidewalk or someone's front porch. And that idea of what the HOST team is doing can be scaled up throughout all of California, but it needs a leader. It needs someone like a California Attorney General to say, this program works. And by the way, there's other programs around the state that equally work. And we want to bring these best practices to all 58 counties. That is something that the California Attorney General can do immediately. But this current Attorney General is completely failing to do. And I'll add one more interesting thing about this Attorney General. I asked this Attorney General for 3 public in-person debates. Did he grant me 3? No. 2? No. 1? No. 0. We're back to 0. Rob Bonta has that number 0, and Rob Bonta seem to go along very well. He refuses to debate me in public live. So news stations across the state said, well, we'll sponsor that debate. Will you do it? He turned them down. I went on the internet and I said to Rob Bonta, I will debate you in your kitchen after dinner as long as you have a Zoom camera going so the public can see the debate. He turned that down. Now, the only reason you're going to turn down a public debate is that you're either scared or you're embarrassed to have your experience and your policies actually challenged before the public. And quite candidly, if I had 0 years of law enforcement experience, but I was trying to explain to Californians why I should be their chief law enforcement officer, I wouldn't want a public debate. I wouldn't want the public to ever hear that. I would be embarrassed to have actually been appointed to this job. If I had enacted the most pro-criminal agenda in California history, and I had to justify that in a public debate, I would be scared to have Nathan Hochman basically talk about victims, and I have to say, well, I'm pro-criminal, and I think that that'll make you more safe and secure. The Korean community, voters across this state are smart. And they know that if you have no experience and you're favoring criminals over victims, that is going to lead to them having a much more unsafe society, a much more dangerous society every time they walk outside their door, whether their business's door or their home's door. It will be much more unsafe. And that's why Rob Bonta does not want to have a public debate and probably won't through the end of this election. I would be very honored if the Junan Ilbo and Korean Daily readers vote for me, Nathan Hochman, for California Attorney General.